Here. Well, it's 8:15. And I'd like to call the Whatcom PUD District Number 1 meeting to order. The first item on our agenda is a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so first let's approve the agenda. Are there any changes or modifications to the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
There's a motion, a second. All those in favor please say aye.
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 Aye. The next item is the consent agenda. We have 2 meeting minutes to approve and the claims for March 28th, meeting minutes of March 8th and March 14th. Any discussion on the consent agenda?
I have 2 quick things. For the claims, do you think you could just give a 30-second overview of the weather, the $5,000 weather system?
Sure.
I sent you a quick email about it, but figured you could just explain it to the 3 of us.
So we've got an old weather base station that we use to monitor wind, temperature, all that kind of stuff. It's got a lot of moving parts to it. And we're spending a lot of money replacing it. It's fundamentally analog. And so what we're proposing to do is just, well, we've done it. We've gone ahead and bought a solid state base station. So it's, it's got all the modern interfaces to it. It's got a solid state anemometer, wind speed measure, and of course, hygrometer for humidity, temperature, all that kind of stuff. And then the electronic interface to feed right back into our SCADA system. So we're replacing an antique with something that's smart.
Thank you.
I want the empty.
We can declare it surplus, bring it to you guys, and then we can make it available to the public. And you can,
I love those old stations.
yeah, they can be cool, but this one just basically doesn't work.
Yeah.
The one other thing I had under claims is just actually a request that we go over our per diem policy again in a future meeting, especially since Jamie is here now. I do just see a lot of variation in the number of per diems that different commissioners are putting on there. And I don't know, I think I'm interpreting the per diem policy possibly inaccurately. So I think it would be helpful to go over it again because there's a lot of meetings I do that I don't list as per diems. And I think that I'm reading the policy the right way, but I don't know if I am. So is it possible to get?
Sure, we can do that. And it's actually a good thing annually to look at to say, because we try to be prospective rather than retrospective in the sense that
That's
we
good.
identify in advance what meetings are predetermined to be for the district business versus political business or other ones. And then have a process where you identify prospectively what you anticipate attending. So rather than putting commissioners in the position of saying, well, I attended these things, can't you approve it for me now?
Yeah.
And so everything was trying to be prospective. So it's good to review that every.
Yep.
Well, and we see the number of meetings, but we don't actually see what the other commissioners went to.
Yeah.
So I just would love that if we could go over it. And I know every
Yeah. we can
every
certainly do
PUD
that.
does it a little differently. So
I've never been over it with anyone.
well, then let's put that on the agenda. That
On
would
the
be an
agenda for next
exciting
meeting.
one.
Good
Okay,
idea.
we'll get it on the next agenda.
That's it. I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. So this is our first public comment period. Are there any comments here in the room? Yeah, walk up to the mic.
Hello, is this on? I don't know if it's on.
Is it on?
It
Looks like it's on.
Okay.
Yep.
Hi, my name's Todd Lagasty and I am the chair of the 40th Legislative District Democrats. And so I'm here today to talk a little bit about the report that you guys got. I haven't seen it on the agenda yet that you've discussed it publicly. Maybe I missed that. Came out March 6th. And I think the only public meeting between now and previously was March 14th, and I didn't see it on the agenda as a specific item. But my comments are a little more geared towards, I guess, when it first came out, I was disappointed. I was disappointed that it said that it was too expensive. And then as I read through it more, I was more disappointed that it didn't, and a little hopeful that because it didn't break down the math to a per customer basis. So when you start talking about $139 million over 4 years, that's a scary number. But when you break it down to 4 years, and then you break it down to the 97,673 residential customers and the 15,000 some commercial customers, and you start breaking it down more and more and more, then that becomes like looking at buying a house. 500K for a house or 800K for a house is scary. But when you break it down to 30 years, then it's less scary. Then when you break it down to monthly payments, it's less scary. And I don't think that was done in here, where they break down the math to what would it cost a regular residential user to shift to municipalized or public power. And I think that was a missed opportunity that was in this report. And so I would encourage our commissioners to go back through and actually, you have the math, you have all the data. So go back and do the math. And I know one of you as an engineer, and one of you teaches at college, and one of you is buying a house. So I know you can do math. And so I would encourage you to go back and do that. I'd like to see that, because when you start breaking down the numbers, it's a lot less scary. And then the other thing, and it does mention this a little bit, but not as much as I would have hoped, is the benefit for the community on moving that forward, i.e. the PSE has a vested interest in making money off of their electrical generation. And we don't, as a community, wouldn't necessarily need to do that as much. And so the ability to shift to more green energy sources that don't have to be generating a profit is something that this community could consider. So I'll hopefully weigh in a little more at the second one. Thank you very much.
So Todd, just for just 1 second, I just want to make sure I captured your comments. Basically, you're saying do the math to quantify the individual cost and then quantify benefits. Do you mean that at an individual basis, or do you mean at the collective community basis?
Both.
Both.
Real quick to follow up on that, if you take 139, I think it was 138 some odd change was the worst case scenario, no BPA power and everything else over 4 years of increased cost. So if you round that up to 140 million, because we're all friends here, we can round up that much. And then you divide it by 4, then you're down to $35 million per year, right, for increased cost. And then you divide that by 112,000 people over that year, and then you break it down even more. It gets down to looking like a number, if my math was correct, of about $30 a month per customer. And that doesn't talk about, that didn't take into account any potential bonding capacity. That also didn't take into account the fact that Bellingham was going to try to levy a climate action fund and give $4.5 million per year to PSE. So what do those kinds of things do? And then when I get up here and talk again, since you opened this door and let me back up here, thank you. When I come back and talk again, I'm going to talk about House Bill 1589 and the impacts that could potentially have, that we're not in here because nobody could know that was coming necessarily when this report was generated. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So I just want to remind the commission that we have a separate meeting that is set aside just to discuss this study, and our consultants will be there to present. And the purpose behind that meeting will be, number one, to kind of air all of the issues around the study and have a robust discussion of that. And number two, to get the public's input on that. So
would you mind repeating the time and the location and all that for Todd's benefit?
And yeah, didn't we just get it on the website yesterday
I
too?
believe so.
Yeah.
And so I think it's on the website. My recollection is that it's April 13th from
Tuesday.
4 to 6.
Is that Tuesday?
I don't know.
Oh, no, it's a Thursday. I remember this. I remember it's
Yeah.
a Thursday, 4 to 6. Yeah.
Yep,
April 10th is,
So I think it's April 13th.
April
Monday,
13th, 4 to 6 PM, Pioneer Park Pavilion.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So that's a 2-hour scheduled meeting just for this topic.
And could we ask the consultant to try to address this question of per customer cost?
We can, I
Okay,
mean,
or
the
add a slide?
thing that the consultant looked at was on rate increases that would be needed. So they broke it up by customer class and I don't recall the exact numbers, but they were a 20 or 30% rate increase over what we think Puget would charge. So
I believe Puget's just in the 12-cent average right
something
now.
like that. Yeah.
So 20% would be,
Oh, I got somebody raising their hand.
Just,
and probably wanting to clarify the timing,
okay.
Oh, okay.
but she lowered her.
Yeah, so
Oh, no, now I think Anne's ready to speak. Anne, go ahead if you'd like to
Oh.
speak.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes,
I just wanted to confirm it is on the website and it's
Mhm.
April 13th from 4 to 6 PM at the Pioneer Park Pavilion in Ferndale.
thank you, Anne.
thanks, Ann. And just for everyone's information, Ann's on vacation in Arizona right now. So-
Thank you, Anne.
Cool. Awesome, Aaron. Well done. Hopefully, we're not ruining your vacation. Sorry, we didn't check online to see if there's any comments. I guess
No
there I
comments online.
Yeah. All right, great. So I'll go ahead and close the public comment period. There's another one at the end. Let's move on to old business and the broadband program update.
And I'll just kick it over to Andrew. I think we have a very short update this round.
Good morning, Chris, commissioners. As you'll see in your packet, we're looking to approve the amended interlocal agreement between the Port PUD and the county. In simple terms, what we've done is we've been working more collaboratively with our stakeholders, our partners, and through that effort, we'd like to add the county staff as a participant on the steering committee that was set up some time ago. So right now, there's just the Port and the PUD, as you might recall. Chris and Rob and then their staff designee, and then we added the same for the county. So that's the update for that part of the interlocal. And then we also, you'll notice the language surrounding the task order was removed. And we went around and talked about whether that was appropriate to have that in this interlocal any longer. I think I recall there hasn't been a single task order created or utilized through this interlocal. So we decided to remove that language. And so you'll see that in your packet. I'm happy to answer any questions. Do you want to stop there and approve that before I move on, or do you want to do that at the end?
And you're talking about approval of the interlocal agreement?
That's
Correct.
Um,
Can I just ask
Go ahead.
one
Commissioner.
quick question, Andrew? Is there any reason we should just rebrand and call ourselves the Broadband Action Team instead of the Steering Committee, just because we know the state broadband office is so focused on
That
the
word.
BAT?
Well, I think Gina Stark has kind of led a separate group, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to have a committee of 30 people overseeing all the projects.
Okay, so the BAT is separate from the Steering Committee.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I think it's going to be a lot more efficient. that
Okay.
way.
Okay, that was it. I'm ready to approve the interlocal agreement. I'll make a motion to approve the interlocal agreement, unless you had anything.
No, I'm good.
I'll make a motion to approve the amended interlocal agreement between the Port, PUD, and Whatcom County for fiber/broadband coordination.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. And there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes. So under broadband update, are there further discussions?
So just one other thing, that there's two other parties that have to now approve the interlocal, the port and the county. And I believe it's on both of their next agenda meetings,
Okay.
meeting agendas. So I'll keep you guys informed as soon as we get an answer. And they may want us to go talk to the county, for instance, at the council about why. And I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
But may not be needed, because this is really straightforward.
I had two items. So the first thing is, Chris, I brought it to you yesterday in our call. That to explore this idea. And by the way, this idea is something that came up in a meeting that Andrew participated on, to ask more detailed questions on the telecom retail study that we did. And I asked, after I was done talking about the study, I did take the opportunity to ask the question, what about the possibility of the PUD having an option at the 25-year period on the port's IRUs to acquire the infrastructure? And I want to ask that question formally of the port. So if Chris, I mean, I guess I want to hear from the commission about that subject. And if you have any thoughts about that. The thing is that the PUD approved a policy that if with our IRUs that we are going to retain ownership. But the port's not an infrastructure organization in the same way that the PUD is an infrastructure organization. It's different, obviously cultural and organizational focus. But one option might be for the PUD to take over ownership at the end of that 25-year period, for us to have an option in the port's IRU. And it's obviously we couldn't do that alone. The port has to think it's a good idea too. But I want to explore that.
I'm comfortable exploring it. The main thing I want to understand is the economics of it, because
Sure.
that I don't want to take over an asset that is going to I need to see the numbers. That's all. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that we can cook up on our own.
Yeah, we may not need to do anything. Yeah.
But if there's something, you know, we have heard that public ownership and perpetuity is a priority for many stakeholders in this community. And that's something that we communicated to Chris and Andrew. I still haven't seen all the numbers from the port in terms of why they structured their IRU the way that they did. And I would like to see them. So I think if we could get some more clarity on that and what the PUD playing a role like that would look like financially, I would welcome that if that's something our staff has bandwidth to do.
So I'd like to have a little discussion about this, not too terribly much. The port is still in the process of negotiating IRUs. They haven't signed yet. So today I can't tell you what the form is going to be, what the requirements are and all that. I'll talk to the port about including us at the time that the contracts expire. So I'm characterizing the IRU as a contract, I guess, in the sense of it.
Can you explain to us what an IRU is?
Oh,
It's an
sorry.
irrevocable
Yeah, I know
right of
it.
use.
Oh, you know what it's
Yeah.
about.
Irrevocable right of use.
Thank you.
And that's really hard to say 3 times fast. So
And by the way, if I may help here, just again, for the public's benefit, it's the agreement that governs who owns the infrastructure over its lifetime, and at the end of a period, how the ownership can transfer.
very broadly, yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot more to it than that, but that covers a lot of it. So I can easily talk to the port. We can figure out some mechanisms so that at the end of their IRU, if there is a transfer of assets, that we be somehow included in the offer. And just as a reminder, that would be an event that takes place 25 years in the future.
With a different.
So, well,
No.
I mean, the world changes. 25 years, yeah, that's right, Jane will still be here. A lot of things change, and you'll have at that point a depreciated, possibly end of life kind of asset. I don't know what the cash flow will look like, to your point on the economics. I would have a very hard time characterizing what that would look like today. And I think it's one of those things where if we could set it up so that we're offered a choice to look at it 25 years from now, we should. And, you know, at that time, it may make perfect sense. And the port may have a competitive disposal process. And so we would be bidding against others, presumably, or maybe not. Again, it's 25 years in the future. I have no idea if anybody else would want these assets, or if it would be a bidding frenzy. You know, it could be anything.
Chris, is it possible in their like negotiation with telecoms that they're already? I don't want to speak at like out of turn or be offensive to anybody, but are they already making deals with people for what happens at the end of their right of use? Because I was under the assumption that going into some of these, that there are already discussions for what happens
There's all
25
kinds,
years from now.
yeah, there's all kinds of different forms that these things can take. Where the ports actually settles, I don't know, because I'm not in the negotiations. They may have one of those contract clauses where at the end it reverts to some third party for some nominal payment, you know.
Yeah, that was what I had
Or
understood.
It may be that at that point, they get a right of first refusal and you gotta make some kind of an offer.
Sure.
Or it may be that none of that it's just gonna be offered competitively, you're free to bid on it, and you know, since you've operated for 25 years incumbent, you would have the best knowledge of what it's actually worth, so I don't know how that thing's gonna be structured.
That'll be public when it's done.
When it's done, presumably, I would look to council. Yeah, they would have to publish the IRU. That I don't think would be any kind of trade secret.
No, the IRU would be publicly approved. Be a public document either approved by a commission or by a general manager or executive director's delegated authority. But Chris is right. Various contracts may have terms of the operator to buy the facility at the end. So something that Port negotiated in with the PUD in that instance, it would likely be subordinate to some other party's right that's pre-existing.
And I would just, you know, kind of the other thing to think about is it's likely that any IRU that the port signs with an ISP, which is an internet service provider. So any IRU signed with an ISP would be different from any other IRU signed with an ISP, even with the port. So if they sign 5 or 6 or 10 IRUs in the next 10 years, it seems to me likely that the terms and conditions of each would be slightly different. And so anyway, we can talk to the port and try and figure that out.
Okay, the second item I wanted to raise is regarding retail. I just wanted to let my colleagues know that you probably know that I was passionate about the making sure to go down all the rabbit holes of possibility for seeing if there was a way for the PUD to make retail possible. And I've confided to Chris that I've quit trying. But I wanted you both to know that and you know that for me the meeting that I had with Noanet, Petra Tech, and Andrew. I don't think you were on. Were you on that call? Maybe you were, maybe you weren't.
Had so many calls.
Yeah, I think it was when you were on vacation. Yeah. It was just to basically for me to cement why retail at this stage for the PUD is problematic and probably not a wise choice. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to try to get someone else to do it. And so here's what I mean by that. So I'm channeling my energy now into a conversation with Noanet. And of course, Noanet provides indirect support of retail for PUDs, but it is not a retail ISP. So the idea that I'm proposing to Noanet is that they form a new entity, either under the Noanet umbrella or a new entity in collaboration with the PUDs to provide retail service to the public sector on utilities. And obviously other people need to like that idea too. But Noanet, there's individuals at Noanet who seem to like at least exploring the feasibility of that idea. And I don't want to go to the telecom meeting in April, and if the commission thinks that I shouldn't be pursuing this, I will stop. But I just want your general head nod there. Go ahead and ask the question. Doesn't hurt to ask.
Can I offer a suggestion?
Yes.
An idea that I have talked about, but have not had time to push on is that, but I've talked to Chris about it. I've talked to Senator Shoemake about it. Is the idea of a statewide public ISP. So yay, we got retail authority in 2021, hardly anyone is using it because everyone is running up against the same issues, which is that the private telecoms have massive economies of scale over us.
And they
And
always cherry pick
they,
the good.
yeah,
the
so
good
they've got
products.
one billing department, they've got a crew that covers a huge territory, you know, Anacortes, Access Anacortes has 9 people in their fiber department. I'm concerned about their long-term.
Wait, what if
you
they
know,
could outsource that? for
Well,
example?
Access Anacortes, we talked to them, they're not interested in serving Whatcom County for whatever reason. But what I think we should do, and I'd love the PUD Association's support on this, is look at in the next legislative session, could we get Drew Hansen, who is the Public Broadband Act sponsor, to get behind this idea of creating a statewide public ISP? That, you know, where we centralize a lot of these functions so that we're not all creating a billing system. We're not all you know, we have, and NOAANET could obviously play a huge role in that. So there, can you take that to the that to the telecom
Yeah,
group and see
may
if
I,
we can,
may I
yeah,
make a note to pass that idea forward?
yeah, and I know, I mean, I think Sharon, who you, as everyone knows, is an economist, was like, well, that seems like it makes a lot of sense to me. So at least back of the envelope, it sounds like she would be interested in. I think Drew Hansen would be very open to talking to us about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then also Sharon Shoemaker is also on board, or
Well,
he's
I
interested in
mean,
the idea.
yeah,
I didn't hear you from you, Commissioner Arnett. Stupid idea or something?
No, I think, I mean, I think it's a great idea. I really like this idea of a statewide public eyes. It's the first time I've heard about that. That's exciting. Yeah, a tool, I think anytime that you have a chance to get, you know, education, it's probably good.
Okay.
but
so-
it could be a great thing for Waputa to start pushing on a little bit. They pushed so hard for all of us to get the retail authority, but it's not working for most of us, you know, people are.
With the exception of Jefferson. As far as and then what's the other PUD? That's there's one other PUD.
Another one.
Chelan's got a lot of region.
Well, it's a little different, but I mean, it's yes, but yes. Yeah, I'm not diminishing your point. I just what's unique about Jefferson is they're stepping into it. Whereas Chelana, it's been their organic. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, that's all I had for broadband update. Thank you, Andrew, and
Can we ask Andrew if he has any more?
no, I'm sorry, yeah, thank you.
Andrew, do you have any more on the broadband?
Just one, if that's okay, just really kind of a current events update on where we are. Wanted to talk specifically about the Point Roberts project, if that's all right.
Great.
So our partner is PointNet, as you might recall, on our application into the state broadband office for a $3.5 roughly million grant to build out fiber optics in the unserved areas of Point Roberts. What we've recently learned is that there's an old cable system, a CATV plant cable system that's been out of use, I think, since 2019. But our partner has an opportunity to basically retrofit that and serve a little more than 500 customers. And then in addition to that, set up a wireless service offering to the remaining folks on the point. And PointNet's looking for a loan from the county to make that happen. And so just something to consider as an organization is if that goes through with the county loan funding this system, it would make the point essentially served, and it might not make sense to continue pursuing state grants to serve the point. So we would have to ask ourselves if it, you know, that $3.5 million could probably go somewhere else around the state to serve more unserved folks if the area that we are going to focus on suddenly becomes served. So I just wanted to bring that up. No change in direction right now. We're not pulling it out or anything like that from the grant, but wanted to let the commission know that that is just a development that we're watching.
Is it possible to ask the county to delay that until after we find out about the grant from the state, which is around the corner?
Well, I'm not gonna characterize the state grants around the corner just because we don't know. their track record's been horrible. And now they've said end of April. I don't know. If we get it in the first half of the year, I'll be absolutely delighted. The thing that I find interesting is that Bob has sent a request to county executive in writing, and I believe, if I recall, he has assured 150 meg symmetric to customers through that system. So, you know, that fully meets the state requirement for broadband. And you know, at that point, I would say that our grant application is superfluous. So if they're able to pull that off, that's probably the best use of public funds, because they'd be able to get it done for 1/10 of what we're looking for. And, you know, I honestly don't know if they can pull it off. It's interesting, you know, and, you know, if the county executive was to ask my opinion, I would say if you can make it happen for 1/10 of the money, you should. And then that'll free up the state money to go somewhere else.
So on that subject, and you, again, communicating it in advance, the county executive asked me to, he's doing some meetings on April 8th, it's a Saturday, to discuss wireless, including a meeting with PointNet and also with some other wireless vendor. And if it's okay with the commission, I will make the case for fiber. And particularly, let's give fiber a chance first before we potentially short circuit it with a wireless project.
I would just say that you know, I don't know what the future holds. My belief is that there's not enough bandwidth in wireless to you know, serve symmetric gig or symmetric 10 gig or wherever it's going to go ultimately.
Let me tell you what's motivating my statement. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm just talking about timing. And if we're going to hear back in the next few weeks or a few months, then it would be a mistake to forego better infrastructure for less good infrastructure.
I'm just suggesting that, you know, there's probably room for lots of good answers. And if the county executive wants to pursue something, I don't think we can attempt to counter that. We ought to just let that happen and then pursue fiber on our own as the opportunities arise.
Okay.
For federal and state funding. I'm not looking to pick a fight with the county executive.
No, that's not a fight. It's a persuasive attempt to be persuasive. I think this commission has said over and over again that we prefer fiber over wireless where all possible. And we've gone to the trouble of preparing a proposal for Point Roberts that's fiber. And I have been listening in on my own time, many discussion groups on the subject of broadband in the United States. And one of the things I've heard now a couple of times, and it takes me a couple of times for things to register sometimes, is that many early developers of broadband regret the amount of time they spent on exploring wireless solutions. They regret the time they spent on internet over power lines. They regret pursuing solutions that weren't future-proof.
I think we have a hard job as policymakers, to try to, we don't have a crystal ball to look into the future. And I think there's the tension, and again, I chatted with Pam Hickey at Pacific PUD, and I would recommend any of you reach out to her. They are doing a lot over there on broadband. They just bought a whole bunch they did a spectrum auction, and they are doing wireless to a bunch of households in Pacific, which is very rural county, but because the cost per home is just, and so they're getting internet to their most underserved in a much more affordable way than if they were doing fiber. Now, in 20 years, all those households might still have a problem. So, you know, that's the tension, is the sort of ability to get it quickly and cheaply with wireless versus building the long-term infrastructure that, as we've all used, you know, the future-proof infrastructure, so. But it was interesting hearing her update.
Mhm. Okay, so I'll leave it alone. Sounds better, leave it alone. And I might still go, but I'll do it on my own nickel. So. Any more on broadband?
That's my report. Back to you, Chris.
That's it for me. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, let's then move on to new business.
I think.
Adjudication.
Oh, sorry.
Quick.
Sorry, I let you out, John.
It's okay, you didn't take a vote on the ILA, did you?
We did.
We did.
Yeah, and it passed 3-9.
Okay, I was getting set up here. So the House Bill 1792 on adjudication that has gone through with unanimous approval out of the Senate committee. So it's now on to Senate rules for second reading. Just checking their calendar a moment ago. They have various caucuses this week, so we anticipate probably some action at the rules later this week. The budget proviso came through into the Senate budget as the group had proposed, our local group had proposed. It did not include the last minute edits from the suggestions from ecology. I don't think that is problematic. So it's in the Senate budget and the budget proviso. So that's all moving forward. May have more at our next meeting on the bill and the proviso. You'll see in front of you a notebook for your pleasure reading. Much of that has some confidential legal memos. Some of the documents were like our PowerPoint that we used here for our update on water law would be public, but treat the whole document as confidential. If there was a public record request, we would go through and provide those that are public and exempt those that are privileged or other sorts of communications.
Are the things that are privileged marked as
Not
such?
separately. So that's what I'm saying. Treat the whole document. Whole binder is confidential. If you have questions about anything, let me know.
Okay. Okay,
It's got confidential written across.
So, so we have a legal team meeting Thursday in Seattle where we're going to go through a variety of issues and forecast what our needs are going to be, staff and otherwise, and strategies through the filing, which is anticipated this fall by ecology, and then what we're going to need to do up to a year later, depending upon this bill for filing our claims. And it's also probably a precursor to a more in-depth session with you, likely an executive session on where we are at with our legal strategies and recommendations as we approach the filing of the adjudication. So more to follow in depth with you later this spring or summer.
as a related issue, water use efficiency is as within the context of our use of proceeds here. And is there any more updates on water use efficiency, exploring how to get that line of work funded and explored?
I know Steve and Rebecca are working on what needs to be included in our phase 3 scope of work for Wire 1. And that's going to be a public discussion, and especially folks that are concerned about conservation, they should be on the call and have their input. Then that's the right place for it. And that is where conservation really belongs, is in our total long-term study and
In phase 3.
in phase 3.
And when you say call, you mean the watershed management team?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So the Wire 1 will get together, and Commissioner Arnett, I think you're our voting member on that.
Yeah.
And at some point, staff will have gotten together all of the information, and we will hear from the public. And then when I say we, Steve and Rebecca lead that, I listen in, and I'm still in a learning mode, like I guess we all are. But, so we get it at the staff level, and then there's a presentation made to the management committee that oversees the whole thing, and they take public comment as well. So there's going to be a ton of opportunity for it, but that really is where conservation belongs, and we know that, and that's what we intend to include it.
So the specific area of looking at exploring ideas for how to deal with relinquishment. came up in our last commission meeting. And I also sent emails to you, Steve, or Chris, I don't remember who I sent it to, basically
I think I saw
summarize.
it.
Yeah, to basically, which was to a brainstorming session that I had with Eric first. I think Commissioner Grant's communicated things. I think I'd like an update on water use efficiency at the next commission meeting. How are we addressing?
Okay,
And it doesn't have to be part of adjudication, because what you're saying is outside of the adjudication.
right, it's the WIRA 1 phase 3 of our long-term water plan.
Okay. Understood. Is there anything more under 5B?
I would just, since it has come up, I mean, I spent some time with Brad Rader after our last commission meeting, and I think that if agricultural water use efficiency is something that we're interested in exploring as a commission, actually getting out and talking to people that are in ag is really useful. I learned some really good things from him, like that they tried underground irrigation as a form of water use efficiency, and the roots of berries are attracted to the water, and it destroyed all their piping underground. So it was not a good thing for them. And so, you know, they've changed the way they irrigate a lot over the last 30 years. And now it's just like, and it's a foot or a foot and a half off the ground. They put it on the ground, or underground, there's been issues with it. So, you know, I think whenever we're trying to help a group of people, it's always good to really get closest to the people that are facing the problem and actually make sure they have a problem that we're gonna be solving. And so to me, that meeting was a wake-up call that I think that we need to have a lot more conversations directly with people in the ag community about how we can truly help them. And acknowledge that they have actually been making a lot of investments already in water use efficiency, and have changed their practices a lot over the last few years. But, you know, I think Brad was very grateful for the work that the PUD is doing in water right now. And I think, so I just think trying to kind of keep the communication going, and you all have different connections than I do. So the more we can have those conversations and learn, I think the better whatever kind of program we have will look like. But to me, it was a bit of a wake-up call of like, here's a report on agricultural water use efficiency versus what it would actually look like on the ground.
So, yeah, regarding what I
actually have something to say, and it's probably not going to be well received, but this was the adjudication update. So water use efficiency really isn't germane to the conversation. We can, maybe it sounds like there's enough conversation that we want to have like a work session. We can include it in our commissioner reports, but we get really off task sometimes. And I think that's where this is going.
So yeah, I think the thing that we identified is something that we need to discuss at a future meeting and needs to be on the agenda as such. So we plan to do that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Thank you. So let's move on to new business.
So should I kick this off then?
I can kick it off.
Okay.
Because I've been thinking about it, and actually 2 commissioners have come to me with this basic topic, and let me go back in time a little bit and frame this out. At some point, 4 or 5 years ago, we joined the Northwest River Partners as a member, and we pay about $6,000 a year to be a member of them. It is an advocacy group, and they have a point of view, and their point of view is that the Snake River dams are good, taking them out is bad, gross oversimplifying, but that's their point of view. And you can make really good arguments on both sides of that, and it's a very divisive issue. And you know, my suggestion is if the discussion that we have is merely a recognition of that divisiveness, you guys can simply choose to direct me to not renew our membership. And you know, that's the most profound way to say, you know, we don't want to be part of that kind of acrimonious discussion. And so with that, I want to kick it over to Commissioner Grant, because she approached me, a week and a half ago or so, and wanted to talk about this.
And thank you for adding it to the agenda, Chair. I read this article in our NWPPA magazine that was written by Kurt Miller, who's the executive director of Northwest River Partners. I was surprised by the tone of the article, and it did kind of have it felt to me like fighting words. It made me interested. I went to the Northwest River Partners website, was surprised to see that Whatcom PUD was a member. And I think I went back to the conversation we had in March of last year when you came to the commission to ask if we would make a donation to their organization. And at that time, Commissioner Deshmani said that he did not want to. He wanted to remain neutral on the issue, at least at that time. And I said I'd never heard of the organization before and didn't want to donate to them. Did you know we were members at that time?
Yeah, and I was making a request for additional funds.
Okay.
So I thought I was clear on that, and I didn't know
Yeah, you were.
when or why we had joined them. But it was just one of dozens of things that we're members of. And by the way, I have asked Annette to put together a list of all of the organizations we're members of, how much we pay, and all that. I'll get that to you next meeting.
So I guess just some really helpful context in that conversation would have been that, by the way, we're members of this organization and we pay $6,000 a year to them. So that took me by surprise. I was not on the commission whenever we decided to become a part of their organization. And just in researching some of the things that they have on their website, I mean, they're saying things like a decade by decade comparison shows significant increases in the total number of returning adult salmon for both the Columbia and Snake Rivers since the first federal dams were built. And that's when, we're also seeing science from NOAA that's showing that, salmon in the Snake River are decreasing by a factor of 50%. And so it just doesn't align with the science that we're seeing from NOAA. And they are a very political organization. I researched a little bit more of what they're doing and their positions on things. So I would like to make a motion, and I'm very open to more discussion, but I would like to make a motion that we not be members of the Northwest River Partners effective today.
Is there a second? For purpose of
Or perhaps
discussion.
more discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're just opening the motion for discussion.
I mean, I recently received some information from the Northwest River Partners on the lower Snake River dams. And
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I
Yeah.
asked for a second.
Oh, I thought we were going for discussion.
Yeah, let's do more.
But-
You take a second
It didn't.
to allow
There's a
discussion.
motion. We have to have a second.
I'm not ready to second.
I'll second it.
Yeah,
I'll second it. So there's a motion on the table.
Yes.
so. I don't think that I know enough that I would be willing to just in this moment say that I want to not be a member of this organization. I don't have any historical information on why we decided to be a member of this partnership. Some of the information that I did receive was accurate. I know you're saying that there seems to be like disparity between like what NOAA is telling you and what they're telling. I just don't have enough information to make that call right now. And I don't know. Like I said, I have no historical information for why we're partners. I guess I would like to ask you, what is it about being a member that does not sit well with you? Like, what is it about being a member of the Northwest River Partners that you want to just get out effective immediately?
So I think that what's going on in the lower Snake River dams is an extremely complex issue. It is not black and white. And I think that the political advocacy that I'm seeing from the Snake River dams or from the Northwest River Partners is attempting to make it really black and white. And there's been a tremendous amount of research done on this issue. And I think that when we have sort of binary and oversimplified standpoints on things, it can make decision-making even harder. And I think that we're also members of WPUDA, and they are taking a very strong stance on the lower Snake River dams and a not breaching position. And I guess I don't really see a benefit to our ratepayers necessarily of this additional $6,000 per year that we're spending. And I mean, we can get into more specifics about the lower Snake River dams, but I being a member of that organization does not send a message of neutrality on this issue.
Which is the policy that the commission has adopted in 2000. I became a commissioner in 2018, and in the summer of 2018, summer of 2019. The subject was brought a resolution to support the Snake River dams, and I was able to convince the commission to remain ambivalent on the subject. And that's certainly been the since then the position of the commission. And a contribution to Northwest River Partners is inconsistent with being ambivalent. Northwest River Partners produces no new information. They're not a source of new discovery or new analysis. They are purely an advocacy group for a position, and so we're not going to learn anything new by way of our contribution to Northwest River. Instead, we're basically amplifying their position by providing additional dollars to them. And that's why I would be in favor. That's why I seconded the motion.
So one thing I would like to add to the discussion, and I wasn't here, so I don't have a clue why we chose to become members. However, I will say that there are some elements of the discussion that are black and white. Removal of the dams will cause rates to go up. They will increase power prices in the Northwest. I know there's all kinds of studies that say no, but it flies in the face of common sense.
That's a subject for debate.
It's a subject for debate. So, you know, I suspect that at the time that was the view that prevailed, that we're gonna defend lower cost options for our customers, and that's what we're gonna go. This organization's doing that, we're in. I would just, you know, if to kind of characterize Commissioner Grant's comments in WPUDA is taking a very balanced, well-researched and civil approach to this whole thing. And, you know, to the extent we are a member of WPUDA for lots and lots of reasons, this is another good one to say, you know, kind of what they say. And I'm not seeing where the Northwest River Partners adds a lot to civil discussion in the Northwest on this topic. And, you know, I wouldn't bring it to you today to join. But I mean, so we can cancel with them and get our name off their website. I don't think we're getting any money back.
Yeah.
But
The thing that comes to my mind immediately when we're like, let's just, you know, do what WPUDA is doing, is that in my first board meeting in January, when the federal sort of legislative was laid out, bullet point number 5 said salmon populations are recovering in Washington state. That is inaccurate. It is a bald-faced lie. Here in Whatcom County, we had 2,500 Chinook salmon die in the Nooksack River prior to spawning. So the discussion for me as somebody who comes from a fishing family, who worked in the commercial fishing industry, as that salmon populations aren't recovering. I mean, you can see a small recovery in pink salmon, but that's not the valuable salmon. So I think that the Northwest River Partners is doing good work. I guess I'm not going to lay out my own personal opinion on the lower Snake River dams, but I certainly wouldn't be ready to say that we shouldn't be partners. Again, I don't have enough information on what that partnership offers, why we agreed to be partners, and I think that they are putting out some good information. And again, this is from a fishing, you said this doesn't help our ratepayers. And in some ways that's true, because our ratepayers are not the public, but fishing as an industry in Whatcom County is still like number 3. So, the port did an economic study on the commercial fishing industry here in Whatcom County. And I think that it's still very important to this community. Again, I just think that the river partners, that they're doing some good work. So I'm not ready to say
In
that.
terms of wanting to protect the dams.
Wanting to protect the salmon specifically.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
And I guess that's part and parcel, perhaps, but from a fishing perspective, I think that they're doing good.
Well, I can suggest that we continue to bring information forward on this, and then when it comes time to renew, which will be later this year, December, maybe January, that's when we pay the bill.
Yeah, why
this
don't we
year.
put a flag in them?
Yeah.
Yeah, great idea.
And then just bring it up and, if you guys want to renew or not. And
Sounds good.
But I do think that there was a first and a second.
Yeah.
Well,
Motion on
I
the
guess
table.
I would also just say, I realized I didn't, there wasn't a memo or anything attached to this. It was just on the agenda. And I did bring, there's like a 6-page summary of, there's been a lot of reports done on this issue. And Jay Inslee and Patty Murray kind of did a report synthesizing all the reports that have been done on it. And there's like a 6-page executive summary, which I thought I would just give to both of you in case you want to read it. And then also Clallam PUD, which they are not a member of Northwest River Partners, and neither is Jefferson. This is the resolution that they're looking at their it says that they already passed
They
it.
passed
But
it, yeah.
They did they?
Mhm.
Ken told me that, I think, I would take a look at this, and I mean, do we want to just, is this something you'd want to put on the agenda for our next meeting when you have more time to research it, or do you feel like?
Well,
you just-
when do we make the decision to, because, you already stated, we've already paid our dues, right?
Yeah,
So
we pay them in January.
So there's no benefit to pulling out right now, I guess, unless you're so opposed that you don't want the association. Do you know what I mean? You've already
Yeah.
paid your money. So maybe it's something that we talk about when we're, in budget planning. I don't know.
so I guess there's a motion on the table for first and second.
Yes.
So I think there has to be, you move the table.
Move the table, or the two parties who made it and seconded can withdraw the motion, and then there's nothing on the table, or you table the motion to a date certain.
So really, it's, I'd be open to acting sooner rather than later and getting this one out of the way. So I guess I want to know, from you, would you rather table it for a future meeting or put it back to December timeframe?
I would be comfortable with waiting until December prior to paying our dues next, but I'm also amenable to, people want to take that vote soon, so.
I don't think I am comfortable waiting that long. I think that this is a very major issue in the Northwest, that there's a lot of time pressure around, and I would like to revisit it as soon as possible, I think, and take this vote on where we stand, at the very least on the Northwest River Partners membership.
I would request on behalf of staff then that you give us at least 2 months to get some information together that we can give to you guys in advance, so you can have a more robust discussion. For instance, PNUC's entire view of that document you just handed out would be useful for you to read. PNUC, they're the folks who actually look at the Northwest Utilities.
Oh, okay.
And
Is
they,
that an act?
it's an acronym.
Okay.
It's another organization we belong to, and they, there's PPC and PNUC and.
So
And
many.
If you don't mind, I also asked Chris to, or print out of the summary page from the NOAA fishery study. That's the last real new discovery on the subject, in the last 6 months.
Yeah,
Um,
and what PNUC did was they took a look at the actual power issues that were either glossed over or mischaracterized in the Inslee Murray studies. So, there are definitely different sides to this, and I would just like staff to have the opportunity to present you guys with both sides, or all sides.
Okay.
This is not a simple issue.
This is from Noah.
Yes, that's a part of
I
the
Chris
NOAA
printed
document.
that for me.
That's part of a 43-page NOAA document. I didn't think you'd want the whole thing, but I can now forward that to everybody. A tool sent it to me, and I can shoot it out to you guys. But it's a public document, it's NOAA's looking at the whole thing.
So you would like 2 months, is that?
Yeah, it's gonna, I mean, we've got the feasibility study, we've got a bunch of stuff that's gonna
Right.
happen, and then conservation. So I want a little time, because there's gonna be some staff work involved to get this together.
So do you think June?
I would say probably the second meeting in May would be fine.
Okay, well, so then I'll move that we table the discussion until the second meeting.
It's okay.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So we'll see this on in June agenda.
Yep.
So that covers 6A. Let's move on to the general manager's report.
Just the good news here is that my report is relatively brief. A few meetings ago, Commissioner Grant, you had asked a question about how many customers, how many employees are Grandview water system customers. Generally, how many jobs?
Oh.
And this is not, this was open source information that we could get. Recognize that many of these organizations have many different headquarters, not just in our Grandview system. So the jobs that we can attribute to it, we think are around 406. So just FYI, you'd asked me for that.
Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
The second thing is, last week, or perhaps it was last weekend, Intalco made the final announcement that they're not going to be opening. So, the status of the Bonneville facilities that serve Intalco are very much in question. I went ahead and contacted Bonneville and told them that we would be interested in acquiring those facilities. That request triggers a whole series of events. We're not obligated to buy them at this point. But what it does is it triggers a committee to be formed inside Bonneville to ask first, do they want to retain those facilities themselves or not? If the answer is or not, then they would go and say, okay, is there anybody interested? We've got our hand up. And then they would form a valuation and then essentially you'd be into negotiations, offer and acceptance if you wanted to. But I wanted to get us there because there might be others who are interested in those facilities. I was very interested in perhaps getting a 230 kV source at Cherry Point, because the substation would be kind of right in the middle of where you want to be. Depending on what gets served in Cherry Point, you can have hundreds of megawatts, and that would require a 230 kV source and a 115 kind of sub-transmission network that you have to build around there, beyond what we could supply through our 115 network. So just want to let you guys know that I set that in motion, and as it progresses, and it'll take some time, I'll bring more information back to you.
So obviously, questions from the commission?
I have a question, but it's not related to it.
Okay, so as it relates to that, one of the things we would also need to now, also consider is actively, perhaps working with the port in a business development capacity, in some capacity, to attract customers who need a lot of power. Because it would be,
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of a capital investment is probably more than we could undertake without a customer, so.
There are a number of customers that are already interested in that. And last week I met with Don Goldberg and Sat Paul
Great, you're already on it.
to talk about two of these specific customers and long-term planning for infrastructure at Cherry Point, well beyond electric and water infrastructure, but roads, rail, port, everything. And so, yeah, we're on this.
That's my-
Breweries, oh, I like your thinking. Ooh, got my full attention now. No, those unfortunately are not big electric loads or even water loads, so. But no, we have one customer that's looking at 200 megawatts adjacent to the Talco plant, another one that's 20, so not as big. And then several others that are between 50 and 100 megawatts that are in the area, so. There will be a 230 source needed there eventually. And wanted to make sure that, we were in line.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
We've been talking, I think, since November about a small scale renewable energy project for the PUD to offset some of our load. Are we gonna be able to get a presentation on that sometime soon?
As soon as I'm done,
Okay.
that's our operations report today.
Oh, perfect. Great. You're aiming to please. Thank you.
So, is Kurt with us? Yeah, he's there. Kurt and Brian have done a ton of work studying it. And they sent me a note on it late last week. And Kurt, could you take it away?
Morning, commissioners. Morning, John. Morning, Chris. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
So Chris asked me a little while ago to investigate some options for solar for the PUD. And so I contacted a local solar company about what our options were. And they provided some information for us to essentially cover the entire plant 2 maintenance roof with solar panels and tie it into our system up there at plant 2. We took their numbers, and Chris asked me they gave us some numbers for 30-year cost and some different options. And Chris asked me to do some options with those numbers, see what kind of payoff timeframes we were looking at, and just maybe what kind of sizes, and taking different energy costs changes over the next few years and over the next long-term 20-30 years. We figured out that if we actually, so initially they were talking about a 70 kW system, but that would have been nearly over $150,000 initial costs, I believe it was. So we kind of looked at what possibilities there were for either going smaller or bigger, or, and like I mentioned, different rates. And so we found that if we actually went with a smaller system, approximately half of that, we could pay it off not pay it off in the sense of get a cost of return in less than 10 years. And so then we looked in some other options of what kind of federal credits we may receive. And so making some assumptions based on federal credits and changes in electrical costs, we kind of settled on a 30 kilowatt system. And that with different assumptions would either be a 5-year or a 10-year payoff. And then that would include receiving some federal dollars, which we don't actually know what they are at this point. And so based on that, we put together an RFP, and it's not exactly what is on the bottom part of the second page that you have in front of you, but that is a basis of a lot of the what we requested of the people that we sent this to. So we actually sent it out last week to three local companies to provide an RFP, and then the other one was on Whidbey Island, but they seem to have a pretty good footprint of where they worked, so we felt like they were a good option. They were all set up for public work. That was one of the concerns as well, is that the firms that we contacted were able to do public work in general. And so we found four, like I said, three were in Whatcom County, one outside of the county, and we're looking to get some RFPs back from them on I think it's the 14th of April for a 30 kilowatt system on the Plant 2 admin building. And I'm sure that you have some questions that I may be able to answer, and I'm ready.
I'm just delighted that we're moving forward.
Okay, great.
So just kind of a recap. Kurt and Brian looked at this and we did some sensitivity testing, and we get down into the small systems like 10 kW, it makes no sense at all. Those residential size systems on a per kW basis are a lot more expensive. So, they did a sensitivity test and found there was a little valley in the cost, which is right around 30 kW. This thing will generate about twice the savings over its life that it costs to put in. I think that the basic assumptions in the study are good, and they did sensitivity test them. We hope to bring back a contract to you guys in a month or month and a half, and get your opinion on it and hopefully your approval.
Well, I have to say that there's no way I'm gonna vote against putting solar on the PUD campus. Having said that, for me, the goalposts are about doing something significant. We are a public utility district. I had solar panels put on my barn in 2017. And this was something that was a significant accomplishment, in my opinion, for the PUD maybe in 2010. But today we have to be thinking much more ambitiously. I'm glad we're taking this stuff. But what matters to me is mattered since the time of becoming a commissioner is something significant. And that would mean at least hundreds of kilowatts or megawatts. Low megawatt, not hundreds of megawatts. And I'm still looking for that. Ever since becoming a commissioner, I've been looking for something significant, and we don't have anything significant. I've helped identify vendors to help us deliver something significant. We haven't done anything in that regard, and I'm still hoping, I'm still waiting for Godot as it relates to something significant as far as substituting our consumption with renewable resources. So, but of course, I'm supportive of this.
So I just would point out that we buy a small amount of tier 2 power over the top of our high water mark, and it's not megawatts, it's kilowatts. And so this is really shaving off the peak of some of that stuff. We don't have an economic option for essentially eliminating our load. There's no argument I can make that would be in our customers' favor at this point. We don't have access to a lot of the tax credits and other subsidies that are available to private owners or public agency. So this actually makes sense economically. I can defend it, and it saves money for our customers. This is not a demonstration project. This is actual operational improvement that we're looking at. And operational improvements by their nature are incremental. And this is an incremental step forward. I'm proud of the team putting this together and the way that they've approached it. And I will be delighted to present the contract to you guys.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that.
And that's, I think, is that it, from operations, Kurt?
Yes, that's it for operations.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thanks, commissioners.
Let's move on then to commissioner reports. Okay. Would you like to go first?
Sure. I attended commissioner training, this past, month. Day one, I know I talked about it before we even went into it, it was on Robert's rules, which we do not use. Although there are elements, of course, that we must use, and we're a little rusty. That will, we need a second before you discuss. I do think that I learned some good things though during that discussion. You know, and I had told them, you know, we don't use Robert's rules, or we loosely use Robert's rules, and you know, that we prefer sort of a conversational meeting, and some, I was told that, well, that's lovely, that we should always keep in mind that business meetings are for transacting the business of the organization, and that robust conversation should happen during workshops, which I agree. And that, you know, and that's why, you know, as we get further and further off track, it's good to like bring that back. You know, we have a member of the public here today, which is really lovely, and I'm sure that, you know, they want to see what's on the agenda. So that was useful. And I think something that we should always keep in mind too. Anyway, and I think I've said before that I do appreciate the sort of like conversational, less formal tone of our meetings. I think that given that, you know, the purpose of the meeting is to transact business, so that we should always keep an eye on the conversation. I attended, because I'm the member of the Government and Communications Committee meeting at Wapuda. It was mostly, you know, just recapping our day, Wapuda Day on the Hill, and how coffee service went. And it was a great meeting, but not a lot learned. And I attended the Wapuda board meeting. There was no action taken, but we did have a couple of really great reports, one of them from Energy Northwest. And they presented some super interesting polling data in regard to nuclear energy on both the west and east side of the mountains, with new sort of, I don't want to say it's overwhelming support, because that's not how it was worded, but like non-opposition to exploring nuclear, which I was really taken aback by. You know, and I don't know much about how they're polling, or, you know, where they're, but it was surprising. And I am interested in seeing where Energy Northwest goes with that information. So I also had a conversation with Eric Hurst. It sounds like every commissioner at some point recently had a conversation with Eric Hurst on water use efficiency. I will be reaching out to Chris and to you, Steve, on maybe getting a meeting so that we can discuss that. Two preliminary questions that I had for him going into these conversations is, you know, given relinquishment, you know, how are we going to approach water use efficiency? And it looks like there's some exceptions in water code for relinquishment that I'm sure he'll want to talk about, and I'll want to talk about. And then we also, I've lost my train of thought, God. And that's, yeah, so we'll get a meeting together. I also asked if it was the appropriate time, you know, with adjudication for us to be having discussions of relinquishment and water use efficiency. He seems to think that getting the ball rolling is a good idea. So hopefully we can sit down and have a conversation about that soon. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just offer one comment. I really appreciated the nuanced description of the Robert Rules Order discussion, because it is your commission meeting. So you get to decide how you want to have the conversational basis or get very, very formal. And I know, having seen a number of the Robert Rules consultants, they become very strict if that's their bailiwick.
Right.
So just with that in mind, but you had a very thoughtfully expressed nuance. Balance kind of approach, so, but it is your commission meeting.
Yeah, it's very helpful to point about when we went off to discuss water sufficiency, that it should be on the agenda as such. Yeah.
Mhm.
Commissioner Grant?
Well, I already talked about my meeting with Brad and in the wrong place, but I think again, just really helpful for me, talking to Brad Rader, one of the larger berry farmers in the county. And then, I wanted to also share that for the last 3 months or so, I've been meeting with a group of commissioners from different PUDs and a representative of Energy Northwest's executive committee. And all of us have been elected, or in the case of the Energy Northwest member, appointed with kind of a clean energy focus. And so we are sharing sort of lessons learned and how we're working on that. It's Clallam, Jefferson, Kitsap is involved, Snohomish, and then it's Mark Dodon from the Energy Northwest Executive Board. So we're kind of just trying to learn a little bit more from each other. And I think all of us sometimes don't always feel like we're PUDA has positions that necessarily represent what our districts want. So sort of trying to get a little bit more organized in terms of speaking with a unified voice on that. So I did want to share that I'm doing those. And then this afternoon, Chris and I are meeting with the city of Bellingham to the Seth Vidania and Claire Fogelsong, who are the climate / clean energy managers, to talk about the results from our report and just a little bit more in terms of how we're working together, since we do have an interlocal agreement that we passed in 2020, but I think I have really kind of struggled to figure out how we are working together. I think that's all I have to share right now. Oh, actually, sorry. Are you going to the Public Power Council fuel meeting on Thursday?
Chris sent me
okay.
an email about that. I should have done it before this meeting. I got that email yesterday. What time is the Thursday meeting? PC?
I'll make sure Chris gets it to you, but what I'm
Go back and look, but yeah, it's a virtual Zoom meeting.
And if you're, I know you said you wanted to go to some of these
Yes,
PPC
yes, I
meetings,
did.
so I didn't want to jump in, but what I have been hearing from other PUDs is that getting feedback to PPC and to BPA about our desire for, carbon-free products and things like that is important that, as they're working on contracts going forward.
It's typically an all day, it's typically an afternoon meeting, I think.
It's typically a 90-minute meeting.
Yeah, it's not all day.
Yeah.
It's a relatively short meeting.
Can I, what I'll do is I'll get back to you, because I don't know what time of that PPC meeting. I have some other meetings on Thursday.
It's 1 p.m.
Okay, that conflicts with the EDI board, so I cannot attend.
Okay, do you want me to go?
Yes.
Okay,
Is that okay?
Can you?
Yeah,
Yeah, I can't.
I can do it. I can be our representative.
Okay.
That one.
Okay, thank you.
And
Thanks
I
for
would
bringing it
point
up.
out, Brian has been meeting with PPC and he meets with a number of organizations, including BPA directly. And he is adamant, any marginal power that we've got on this, I think carbon free. And he's been, spot on that. And Steve led that years ago. I mean, this is not news for the district at all.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll go with my first. I'll hit on the nuclear issue. I was also quite impacted by that study. I had expected that the Ukraine war would have cast a shadow on nuclear power, but there's two sides to a balance sheet. On the one side, the uncertainty of a nuclear power plant in a war zone certainly makes one worry. But then the energy security side of the equation makes you not want to import fuel from foreign nation. And then back on the insecurity side, then a lot of the uranium is mined in Russia. So there's like, it's a complex a series of pros and cons about the profile of nuclear, but overall it appears that perhaps for a variety of reasons, including carbon related baseload, which I don't know how much the public understands baseload as an issue. I do believe that it's quite interesting that the increase, and one of the biggest things was that about 4 years ago, just when I became a new commissioner, Carol Browner, the former head of the EPA, shifted from being anti-nuclear to being pro-nuclear. This is long after she had left the EPA, and I thought that was a thought-provoking shift as well. So it's certainly interesting to shift on that particular issue. So I attended the telecom meeting and the energy committee meeting. So I'll talk about the energy committee meeting because that's the page I have open right now. First is that Jefferson PUD is doing an open house and a celebration on April 10th. On their successful municipalization, 10 years since municipalization. And so would love to be there. I don't know if I'll be able to make it, but it's
meeting.
10th is Monday.
Okay,
So I think if a commission meeting would be the 11th, probably. Or if it's the Monday. So if I said the wrong date, it could be
The Monday is the 9th.
Monday is the 10th
Okay.
and Tuesday is the 11th. Yeah, so I'm seriously thinking of attending that just because it'd be a good opportunity to learn. It's important to note that the municipalization consultant they used was a much smaller consulting outfit. And they, I'm curious about what that consultant would have as far as advice for us regarding our study. Another subject that came up was the carbon auction that happened recently at Washington State. They had estimated 20 to 30 million is what they were going to raise. They ended up raising $50 million. The value of carbon that first transacted the auction was significantly higher. Sorry, I misspoke. They raised 300 million. Their target for the price of the carbon was $30 a ton, and it was $50. I'm correcting my numbers here. The target that they had for carbon was $30 a ton. They ended up getting on average $50 a ton. And so they ended up raising close to $300 million, as opposed to, I guess, would have been about 3/5 of that, which would have been 180 million. So the implications of that are interesting. It is a significantly higher value than where the California market is at as far as price per ton. And it's something that to explore that why it's high. But I do recall in the early stages of the California carbon market, they also had much higher initial values. I believe they started approaching $100 a ton. Now the California market has stabilized at a significantly lower price. So it could be an early market situation. But this price per ton has lots of implications in terms of policy choices. The money that's raised from this carbon auction will be used for mitigating carbon, but as well as doing some environmental justice measures. That's the way the legislation is written. So how that money is used will also be of interest. And certainly the PUD has potential of accessing some of that funding too. And our community does. So I look forward to learning more about that as time goes on. The only other update, I know something we all cared about, is the rooftop solar bill. It did not proceed, it's dead. But there, what is alive, the number that was 1427. There is a cost shift study that is now being included in the governor's budget. And that was a request from PUD. They weren't willing to support the bill until some of these cost shifts, the impacts of rooftop solar to the general ratepayer was better assessed. And so that's the purpose of this study. Assuming that that study is completed by the next legislative session, I expect rooftop solar to come back as a legislative measure. And then some updates on broadband. Sure. There's a broadband retail, broadband mapping bill, 1746. That's last I checked, it's still alive. I don't know if anybody has any updates on that.
Still is.
Yeah, it's still alive. And the PUD is in support of that. There's a measure for BEAD matching funds that brought the broadband equity. What did BEAD stand for? Broadband equity and can you help Andrew's BEAD? What does BEAD stand for? Hopefully you'll come in and help me with, but so the 25% match that's being included in the budget. There was an update on the national FCC map challenges. And that Washington's a leader in that regard. We're doing a really good job of challenging the FCC maps, which I think is something we were worried about. Certainly our community is doing a good job, but it's statewide. There seems to be a pretty good effort in challenging the FCC maps. And the last update was that there is a lot of, this is from Millinet, that there's a lot of ISP acquisitions happening. Meaning small internet service providers, explain the acronym, are being acquired by larger internet service providers. And to keep an eye on it. There's a lot of consolidation happening, basically. Andrew?
Sorry, it's broadband equity access and deployment. BEAD.
Thank you. Broadband equity access and deployment. Thank you. And that's all of my update from PUD. Any questions? So let's move on to our second public comment period.
Great. Thank you for this second opportunity. Todd Lagusty again, excuse me, 40th Legislative District Chair, Democrats. And first, I forgot to mention that I think your general manager is doing a really good job. He took the time to sit down and talk with me, and we had a really good meeting, and I did appreciate that. So sometimes I revert back to my nuclear submarine days when I forget to say good job. So good job. The solar is exciting, and I would encourage you to also maybe cost out small wind projects, 10 kilowatt wind turbines. It'd at least be interesting to see what the cost on that looks like. So to include that. Also, to go a little bit backwards and not to get too far into the weeds, but nuclear has a built-in externalized cost, both in the mining and in the waste product that don't really get accounted for. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then there's some other factors that I'm happy to talk with you offline individually about. And then one of the things, again, to go back to the report on the for the EES report about municipalizing electrical power away from PSE and going to public power, is that while there may be a 20 to 30% increase in the cost, it doesn't take into account the built-in profit that PSE already has, right? So if PSE has a 7% profit, then you might be able to subtract that off of that built-in, or utilize that to pay down the debt factor. And from the UTC website on December 22nd, PSE is increasing its net revenue by $223 million just for 2023 and $38 million for 2024. So those are increases in net revenue, which is kind of called profit sometimes. So something to keep in mind. And then I also want to bring up House Bill 1589. Because that will potentially increase PSE rates and make what potentially, I'll say again, because we don't know how these bills play out and you can only read so much into them while they're in negotiations. But Whatcom PSE electric customers could potentially have to be liable for some of PSE's natural gas costs, because that bill establishes a consolidated plan, basically, without going into too much detail. And so PSE wanted their electric customers to basically subsidize their gas, getting rid of their gas customers. And that, couldn't be known and wasn't factored into the EES study. So I hope that you'll be able to look at that. And then I want to talk a little bit about depreciation. Depreciation isn't real. I depreciate off my rental house every year, right? But it actually goes up in value. So depreciation isn't an actual real thing. It's a projection. And so as we look at the fact that they say that PSE's infrastructure is 40% depreciated, that doesn't necessarily mean that it only has 60% of its life left, right? You can extend life out. The city of Bellingham runs its fire engines for we're at 15 years now. I shouldn't say they, I'm not representing them, but they run 15-year fire engines, and NFPA says you should replace them at 10 or move them into reserve status. So there is potential life built in there. And I think that that's something that potentially gets missed because it gets scared out of the way of being seen. And just like a bond, it said roughly about $80 million increased cost over 4 years, or unrecouped cost. So if you ran a $100 million bond for 10 years at 5% interest, which is probably a little high, but you factor high in there for what you would get from the feds, that's less than a $13 million per year payment. So just to put math back in perspective. Thank you.
Corinne Vandergrind has her hand up. From
Great.
Sound.
Corinne, please, thank you. Thanks for speaking up today.
Hi, commissioners. This is Corinne Vandergrind from Puget Sound Energy. I wanted to just make a point of clarification. I think, and I apologize, my audio's a little shaky this morning, but I think I heard a question about percentage for rate increases. And I have heard in the community that PSE has raised rates 20%. For 2023, it was 8.7, and then next year it'll be 1.7. So not to say that that's insignificant. We know, clean energy transition and the CCA will increase rates. But I just wanted to make sure that folks had the most updated UTC approved GRC numbers. And I also just wanted to mention that another thing I hear commonly is that the city of Bellingham would transfer millions of dollars to PSC for us to hit our goals. And that was never a point of discussion and intention from mayor or staff. We were headlong into meeting our targets. The UTC has already approved that we're on track. So we're not relying on public dollars for our state mandated clean energy targets. And then for the decarb bill, Todd's right. That's kind of in negotiation right now. There's a lot of things or amendments being proposed with the UTC and our stakeholders. But I can follow up with you after, well, today is the day that it gets either voted out or not. So I can follow up with you with more information on what's in that bill and what's not. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do you correctly say your name Karen or Karen?
It's Corinne,
Corinne, thank you. No,
just to trip you up.
I just wanted to make sure I got it right. Thank you, Corinne.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, and hope to hear from you again. We appreciate hearing from, yeah, and we know you're on the call steadfast, so glad to hear from you.
Yeah, I'm typically Jack Wellman, you'll see on here. He's a kind of a local policy guy, and he lives in Bellingham, so he loves tuning into the climate discussion. And yeah, thanks for letting me listen in. I was gonna use the first public comment, but I know from experience, don't speak out of your memory. Try to fact check yourself before going on mute. So thanks for letting me speak in the second.
Thank you.
I don't see anybody else that wants to speak, Commissioner.
Okay, if there's no further public comment, then we'll close the public comment period. And I know we're running a little bit later. Which,
Yeah.
is there any other items for the good of the order?
Not for me, Commissioners.
Right, well then let's adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you.
See you in 2 weeks.
All right.